Sydney. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining in today. We are very, very excited to go over some of this information with you all. So really today, what we're going to be talking about is some of the top 9 attendance issues. So for everybody who's registered today, I know some of you have submitted some of your questions. We've taken some of the hot questions from the attendees that are going to be here today, and also reviewing some of the support tickets and what some of the common issues are, and providing some feedback and the best practices to mitigate some of those. So on the next slide, once again, my name is Madison. I'm a client success manager and account executive here at CourseKey. With me today, I also have Todd Northup, who is going to be one of our enterprise account managers. He's also a training executive. And we also have Sydney Wright, who is a part of our product marketing team. So we have a good group of people in here. We're really excited to dive into all of your burning questions and hopefully being able to give you back some great feedback. So let's dive on into it, shall we? Alrighty, so coming in at number 9 on the list is student is unable or struggling to check in or out. So I'm sure you've heard this a million times from some of your students, and it's a little bit broad of a statement. So just at a high end level, if you get some feedback from the students, really there's a few things that you can look at. Number 1, look onto the settings of the actual device that the student is using to log in, and ensuring that everything that is needed to be turned on is turned on. So what exactly needs to be turned on the actual device level, not just within the app. So if the student is going to be checking in with QR code, they need to make sure that their camera is enabled on the actual phone device, not just within the student app. It needs to be on the device level. If they are going to be using sound technology to check in, they need to make sure that their device is enabled on the microphone to be able to listen to the sounds. If they're going to be checking in with biometrics, whether that's face scan or the fingerprint scan on the device level, they need to make sure that's enabled. So you can see here, we have the iPhone settings on the left, and we also have the Android settings on the right. Some additional questions that you can ask too is, number 1, is the student's CourseKey app updated? Sometimes if they're running an older version of the app and it's not updated with the phone, you're going to run into issues. We're pushing updates and new app versions every 2 weeks. So the students need to make sure that their app is updated. Whether they're going in and manually updating it, or my recommendation is most phones allow for auto updates of apps. So making sure they have the most updated app is going to be very beneficial to them. Same thing with the actual device. So if you want to go back really quick, Sydney. Making sure your smartphone is running on the most recent operating system. One thing to remember, that a smartphone is essentially a mini computer. I'm sure we've all worked on desktops that were running on older versions, and you notice that on older versions, some things just aren't working as they should on the newer version. So make sure 2 things are updated. Number 1, your app, and number 2, your actual device. So also for GPS technology on the next slide, this is where we actually got a lot of questions, is students not being able to check in on GPS or having issues checking in using GPS. So 2 things here to remember on the actual device level is, number 1, make sure that they have the setting on their app to location services turned on while using the app. Another recommendation is making sure that they have the precise location turned on for those students as well. So precise location, making sure that's turned on, and also making sure that location services is enabled while using the app. Those are going to be our recommendations for GPS technology. So problem number 8 on the countdown is, of course, GPS is not working. So looking at the recommendations we had from the previous slide, and making sure, number 1, that the location services is turned on and on precise location. There's a few things that we could start troubleshooting from there. If you're noticing that it's with an entire class where all the students are struggling to check in with GPS, let's just do a quick checklist. Let's, number one, make sure that the site is associated with the course. Because sometimes if you're adding in, say, new extern sites all the time, sometimes you might forget to add it to the course. So first thing to make sure is that, number one, it's been associated to the course. The next thing to check is, where's that GPS radius located? And to even try widening it. We recommend always at a minimum having your radius set to 50 meters. And this is because each device is going to have a little bit different of a precision in terms of the GPS location. So maybe like an iPhone might have a more precise location when it comes to their location versus say like an older Motorola. So setting that radius at a minimum of 50 is going to give your students a better opportunity at success. So if you're noticing that it's only happening to say one student, our recommendation, of course, is number one, have that student connect to the Wi-Fi that's at the site. That will counteract any connectivity issues the student may be having at their externship. Also, my preferred recommendation as well is if a student is getting a wrong location error, pulling up their Maps app, whether that's Google Maps or their Apple Maps app, if they open it up on their phone, it will not only re-ping the location, but it will also see where the student's phone is actually pinging. So they can get a better idea of like where their phone's located versus where they actually are. So worst case scenario, if all of that isn't working out, the student does have the opportunity to check in on a computer, on a desktop. Alrighty, so problem number 7, the extern site is really large and we can't capture all the possible check-in points in one geofence. So you'll see this is more common at, say, a hospital site with your students out on their clinical rotations. So our recommendation is actually setting up multiple GPS points for those students. So there we go, perfect. So say if you have a larger hospital site, you could have a check-in point at, say, radiology. You could have a check-in point at, say, the emergency room, and another check-in point at, say, the pharmacy. So that way the students have the opportunity to check in at each of those entry points at that hospital. All right, and problem number 6, you are suspecting that your student is checking in from the parking lot and skipping class. So our recommendation for that is if you're in the classroom setting, and so this is if you have GPS for your school for a scheduled session, layer that with another technology type. So of course, previously we had the ability to have GPS plus QR code, but now we've actually released an update to be able to set multiple technology types. So GPS plus QR, GPS plus sound technology, you'll now be able to have that ability to set that on the course level. So if you have any questions on how to be able to do that, feel free to reach out to your account CSM. But if it's for an externship, say you have a student that you're concerned is going to the site and just checking in the parking lot, our recommendation is assigning a extern site contact on the site so they can receive that weekly extern summary report. So that report would be sent out every Monday to that site manager, and they'll be able to verify the students' hours for that week and if they are accurate or not. My apologies. All right. Number 5. Students are having their friends check them in, or you're suspecting that your students are having their friends check them in. we've received this from quite a few clients over the last year or so, of them being concerned that students are, sending out their login information to their friends and having them check into the classes. So we've heard it all. And we've actually recently shipped a product update to where you can see which device that student has checked into the class on. So you can use it as an auditing feature. If you go into the actual record of that attendance and say that the student for the last 4 weeks has been using an iPhone to log in, but maybe 2 days this week you saw them using an Android, and then go back to an iPhone. That gives you, the instructor, the ability to say, there's something a little bit suspicious going on there, and I'm going to ask the student about it. So you now have the ability to see the device that they're using to log in. Not only that, but coming up here pretty soon, which I'm really excited to announce, is we do have two-factor authentication coming out. So this will add another layer of security to make sure that your students are who they say they are, and helping to prevent the falsification of attendance records. So I'm very excited about that. All right, so number 4 on the list. A student has completed an assignment inside the LMS, but it is not pulling over to course key. So this is going to be for any school that's going to be using our asynchronous attendance piece. So of course, the solution, our recommendation is number 1, ensure the course is set up correctly inside the LMS. So 2 things to really check on. Number 1 is making sure that the course was published before the start date with enough time for all that information to sync over. But also number 2, making sure that for at least blended courses, that the assignments that you want counted for time are within the assignment group with the asterisk. So if you look here up at the top, all the assignments within that assignment group with the asterisk are going to be counted for time. And if there's not an asterisk there, there's not going to be time counted for those assignments. Another thing to think about also is that we are pulling from your LMS every 12 hours. So being that we are, constantly pushing and pulling data from multiple systems, sometimes you might see a delay. So if you see a student has completed an assignment and it hasn't come over yet, give it 12 to sometimes up to 48 hours. And you should see that attendance come through into course key. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to your support team or reach out to your CSM just to make sure that everything has been set up correctly in the LMS. All right, problem statement number 3, student forgot their phone. So there's a few ways that you can go about preventing this from happening. But of course, number 1, the student can check in on a classroom computer or an iPad as long as they have alphanumeric code turned on for that student specifically. So if you have questions on that, feel free to reach out to either your academics team, who's sort of like the leadership involved with course key, or even reach out to your CSM. We're more than happy to answer some of those questions for you. But also number 2, instructors can help students check in. It really depends on your campus's adjustment policy, but that's why we enable instructors to be able to make adjustments. Is if a student is, say, their phone is dead or they forgot their phone for the day, the instructor is able to assist with that. But one thing that you can also sort of reiterate to your students is having your phone there with you in class is no different than like having the same requirement for bringing your textbook to class. So it's a requirement for your academics. Just make sure that you are prepared coming into class for that day. All right, number 2, student forgot to check in. So we do have a few features in our platform that will help to remind students to check in. Of course, number 1, you can actually turn on specific engagements within the system to prompt students to check in. So if a student is submitting a skill to the skills tracker, you can actually require them to be checked in to be able to submit that skill. Or same thing with assessments. For a student to be able to complete assessment, you could turn on the functionality to where they are required to be checked in before completing any of those activities. So it's just a good reminder setting to help keep students to help remind students to be checked in for their activities for the day. And of course, problem statement number 1, and we've heard this many a time, student forgot to check out. So really excited to announce that we do have a push notification to remind students to be checking out of class. So of course, notifications, you need to confirm with your CSM or your campus to make sure that it's been enabled, but essentially the student will receive a notification 2 minutes after the end of class, reminding them to log out. This does not apply for flexible courses, but to make sure that the student is receiving the notification, they have to make sure notifications are allowed on the device level. Next slide, if you don't mind. And also within the student app, the student is able to enable the specific types of notifications that they are wanting to receive. So once again, you may have notifications turned on at your campus, you may not. You need to follow up with your campus leadership or your CSM to make sure that these notifications are or not enabled. But we do have notifications available for students to prompt them to check out their sessions. Once again, thanks everybody for joining on in today. I just want to give you a quick reminder that we do have a full support team available. If you have any questions, if you have any issues with attendance moving forward, feel free to shoot them an email. We have really, really good team who is like prepared to help at all times. And yeah, I will hand it back off to Sydney.